Hello, good evening to you and welcome once again to Business Live. My name is Emmanuel Apwaji Riafe, and coming up in this evening's edition, government to announce major concessionaire for ECG by December this year. 2 more financial institutions acquire final license to operate as commercial banks. And the National Petroleum Authority to crack the whip on OMCs flouting safety standards. These are the headlines plus other stories all on tonight's program. Don't go away. We'll be back in a jiffy.
Business Live today.
Thank you very much for staying. Welcome back. Now, the Energy Minister, Boakye Ejiakon, says job security of workers of ECG would be a major factor to be considered in the selection of a company to manage the power facility. He revealed this at the Millennium Development Authority's Bidders Conference here in Accra, where government is presenting or has presented revised terms to 6 companies shortlisted as potential new operators of the ECG. According to him, this includes the requirement that Ghanaians would own 51% of the new entity.
Ghana Industries, the Private Enterprise Federation, and other business associations have met with government or publicly complained about how unreliable power has negatively impacted their businesses. For government, even more critical is the resulting loss of jobs that was precipitated by unreliable power to businesses. Recognizing this fact, President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, during the 2017 State of the Nation address, warned that if left unaddressed, the challenges in the energy sector will collapse the Ghanaian economy. As you are aware, Ghana has obtained funding from the Millennium Challenge Corporation, a bilateral United States foreign aid agency, for the Ghana Power Compact, which includes the ECG financial and operational turnaround project. The MCC is committing close to $500 million for improvements in the power sector directly and indirectly to catalyze critical private sector participation and investments in the distribution sector. The requirements of the private sector to manage, operate, and above all, carry out strategic infrastructure investments in ECG remains the key objective of the PSP program. I wish to re-emphasize the fact that the government is not privatizing ECG. The government of Ghana will maintain ownership of ECG assets whilst they are leased to the private sector to manage and operate. We require, nay, we insist that the private sector partners make investments in excess of $500 million during the first 5 years of the start of the lease agreements. Indeed, in line with the government's desire to grow the economy through the empowerment of the Ghana private sector, we have requested changes in the private sector participation arrangements.
All right, so that was the Energy Minister, Boakye Ejiakon. Now, earlier, Charles IT was there and has captured other presenters, and let's hear what they are also saying.
The first bidders conference of the concession to take over electricity distribution business of the ECG saw various investors and key bidders of the concession engage government on how best to ensure a successful lease of the company. Power Minister Boakye Agyarko says the concession will help expand the service base of the ECG by end of 2017. He believes the current service expansion of the company, which currently falls at a 37% low, will be increased to over 50% by end of year.
As a nation, we should set our sights firmly on turning around the fortunes of the strategic assets, which so many of us have poured our sweat into building. The MCC is committing close to $500 million for improvements in the power sector directly and indirectly to catalyze critical private sector participation and investments in the distribution sector.
Chief Executive Officer of MIDA, Engineer Orake Safo, says the authority was making up for the loss suffered as a result of agitations by workers of the ECG over the last 7 months. He tells Joy Business government will ensure value for money in its engagement with the aggrieved workers.
We've lost some 7 months, however, we can still make the timelines. The objective has been to ensure that the financial close of the Electricity Company of Ghana private sector participation is completed by September 2018, September 6, 2018, and we believe that we can still make that timeline. Once we make that timeline, then the second tranche of the MCC funds that we receive will be made available. That the concession arrangement is not a sale, in the sense that the assets of ECG will still remain owned by Ghana.
The ECG concessionaire has been criticized by the Public Utility Workers Union. General Secretary of the union, Michael Adumata Nyantiti, is making a case for government to first tackle the internal crisis of the ECG before embarking on any concession. He predicts a hike in utility prices should the concession deal take off in 2018.
If already we are saying the tariffs are high, and of that component, 60% has nothing to do with ECG. And now we say that a private operator should come and take over and manage ECG. And because of that, efficiency will be introduced, so tariffs will go down. We find it very difficult to understand.
The 6 shortlisted applicants for the ECG concession deal interacted with potential local and international investors. They will also have an opportunity to tour selected ECG sites while in Ghana.
Meanwhile, Acting Director of the Electricity Company of Ghana, Engineer Samuel Boakye, has revealed to Joy Business that the company is actively participating in the entire privatization process to ensure that the lot of workers are duly secured. Workers of ECG have raised concerns of their job security in the wake of the ECG concession, but Engineer Samuel Boakye has assured management of the company fully supports government move against involuntary layoffs.
There are still a number of issues to be discussed. If you recall, the RFP that was issued was an initial RFP and it's yet to be finalized. So we expect that MIDA and other stakeholders would collaborate and engage further to discuss the outstanding issues so that the final RFP that will be issued, will be aligned to the stakeholders' expectations and agreement on the various issues that are still outstanding, so far as this PSP is concerned.
So essentially you continue to be part of the engagement?
Oh yes, actively participate and engage to make sure that what comes out finally inures to the benefit of ECG workers and Ghanaians as a whole.
Let's now move away from power and work towards a joint inspection service at the Tema and Takoradi ports have begun. This is expected to reduce the time and cost of clearing goods at the port by about 50% when implemented. Chief Executive Officer West Blue, Valentina Minta, disclosed this in an interview with Joy Business when the Parliamentary Select Committee on Finance paid a working visit to the company. Ebenezer Sabuti was there for Joy Business.
The Parliamentary Select Committee on Finance has been assessing activities so far by West Blue Consulting Limited on the implementation of the Ghana National Single Window Project, which began about 2 years ago. In an interaction with the committee, Chief Executive of West Blue, Valentina Mintep, disclosed the request by the Vice President, Dr. Mahmoud Baumia, to streamline operations at the port has come at a crucial time because the company has begun processes to begin the implementation of the Joint Inspection Service. The implementation of the Joint Inspection Services at the port is expected to reduce the cost and time of doing business between regulatory bodies and traders. She explains the status of the program to Joy Business.
Putting together a national risk management system and a joint inspection tool, IT tool, which will schedule inspections. So if a particular consignment comes into the port, it would look at who are the regulatory agencies who need to regulate that or inspect that. It would also look at whatever risk was allocated to it based on the documents that were provided. So the tool is in place, the team is already in place in terms of the individuals. The standard operating procedure has already been put in place and they've been trained on it. What we're waiting now is for the system to go live, to do the pilot, and then it rolls over. So we're very optimistic.
So when is the system going live?
So we're looking at within a month, we should be starting the pilot, and then certainly by 1st of September, it should be fully operationalized.
What difference will it bring to operations at the port?
I mean, it will bring coordination. You need to ensure that we have coordinated border management approach in place.
Speaking on the assessment so far, Chairman of the committee, Mark Asibeyeboa, said he is confident West Blue and GCNet will collaborate to work in eliminating many human interventions at the ports.
I hope when somebody had mentioned, if somebody had mentioned single window to you previously, I don't think you would have understood it fully. Okay, so I'll be happy if we move into a paperless regime. When we have electronic submission of documents and valuation and everything. We also import goods. Don't you import goods? We all do. So we want trade to be facilitated and for revenue to be enhanced. Okay. That's all that is about. Okay. You facilitate trade and enhance revenue.
No,
they are not an island on their own. All their operations are supervised by customs. So customs should ensure that there is joint inspection, sharing of data, integration of systems, and I think we'll be fine.
The National Petroleum Authority, NPA, says it has started enforcing a government directive to close down all oil marketing companies that fail to comply with safety standards. The move has been influenced by recent gas and fire outbreaks at some service stations in the country. According to the authority, investigations have shown that most of these accidents were due to human negligence and failure to enforce safety standards. The regulator is also pushing ahead to stop siting of new service stations in residential areas. Hassan Tampuni is Chief Executive Officer of the NPA.
It's a decision that NPA has taken and then we are implementing. If you feel the tests of safety standards and it is established beyond all reasonable that indeed there has been some amount of negligence or refusal to follow the safety protocols, we'll crack the whip. We can suspend indefinitely or we can revoke completely and impose fines in addition.
And when are you going to start implementing this?
At once.
At once.
That's right.
So one would also talk about the fact that how bent are you going for to ensure that all these members comply with the safety standards?
We intend in implementing this policy not to take prisoners. We are not going to have any secret cows. You fail the test, we exact the necessary sanctions. So we are not going to have any qualms about who is involved or any mitigation circumstances that you have. Safety standards must be adhered to, and there are terms and conditions of license. And when we come on an annual basis to come and inspect your stations and test the integrity of your system, we expect that 5 months, 6 months, 7 months, or even 11 months under the line, those standards that we saw must still be in place. It's a continuous thing that you must do. It's not an event waiting for NPA to come and then inspect and then they renew your license. We'll still be doing the monitoring. The multi-stakeholder committee that is responsible for review of documentations before permits are given would be converted into additional monitoring mechanisms mechanism, so that not only will they go to do inspection before the grant of license, they will also go, in addition to the monitoring and inspection team of the MPA, to undertake some amount of monitoring. In addition to that, we also have some risk assessors that we have engaged, who will also be going around to test the integrity of the processes that are in existence at various refill outlets. So their reports would also give us an indication whether or not to allow retail outlets at their existing points to continue to operate, or whether to recommend improvement of their safety mechanisms, or whether to recommend even complete relocation of those retail outlets, and we will implement them.
And shifting the focus to the banking and finance sector, the number of banks operating in the country has now reached 35. This was after Construction Bank was given the full universal banking license last Friday, while Beige Capital has also been given final license, but on condition it meets some two key requirements. George Yafe tells us more.
The Construction Bank will primarily focus on financing constructions in the country. The bank has already opened an office at the Octagon Office Complex around Tudu here in Accra. Beige Capital is expected to focus on SME financing. Some analysts have criticized the Bank of Ghana over this approach, especially when it is working to reduce the number of banks in operation with the proposed increase in minimum capital requirement. But head of banking supervision at the Bank of Ghana, Raymond Amanfo, says this process was started long time ago.
When you give a previous year approval, that meets the condition, then you are already by your provisional approval set them to do certain activities. So when they meet your conditions and you can confirm their capital sources and that, then you can go ahead and then give them approval.
He, however, maintains it might be difficult to totally stop issuing licenses to commercial banks.
If you are going to put embargoes, then the embargo must cut across no matter which bank is coming. And assuming you have an international bank like Citibank want to set up, will you say you have an embargo? So we have to be very selective.
The number could also increase to 35 as Ghana Home Loans is almost through in meeting all the requirements to secure its final license. But for some, a lot more banks could increase competition in the sector, a development that could lead to reduction in the cost of credit. However, some are also worried that this trend hasn't helped that much in improving upon the culture of savings in the country.
Meanwhile, the Ghana Interbank Payment and Settlement Systems GIPS is set to allow universal banks in the country directly partake in its mandate. GIPS hopes to do so by offloading part of its shares to financial institutions as part of initiatives taken to encourage banks to take advantage of its products and services without hesitation. GIPS says the move would boost operations to the benefit of the financial sector and the country as a whole. The Chief Executive Officer, Archie Hersey, explained this to journalists at a briefing to mark the organization's 10 years of operations under the theme 10 years of promoting electronic payments in Ghana.
The Ghana Interbank Payment and Settlement System, GIPS, was established to operate under the Bank of Ghana in 2008 to promote electronic cash transactions in the country. Among its mandates was a reduction of cash flow between individuals and commercial banks, which eventually led to the creation of the eSwitch card, which allows financial transaction electronically. After operating for a decade, management of GIPS has hinted that discussions have begun with financial institutions in the country to operate the system. Addressing journalists on activities at its 10 years anniversary, Chief Executive of GIPS, Archie Hersey, disclosed that almost all commercial banks in the country have expressed interest to take over its operations.
It's wholly owned by the central bank alone. All the banks, although they know its usefulness, they see it as a central bank initiative. So when it comes to usage, it's not patronized or they don't feel part of it. When it's owned by the banks, they see it as one of their own and they are more encouraged. It was as a result of that we had a strategy section that we said, right, why don't we work with the banks and allocate some of the shares to the banks so that they own part of GIPS and becomes part of the entity. So that's ownership of the entity, but the function is different. When in the deliberations last year, we were thinking whether we should we leave it open for the banks to decide, or or should we divide it amongst all the banks? And the thinking was, let's leave it and let the banks decide. Those who are interested should actually express their interest. To our surprise, all the banks were interested. So I think that it's good news in that regard.
All the 33 banks.
Is it 35 or 37? It's 35.
He therefore urged the opportunity to highlight some successes chalked by the company since its establishment in the country.
I remember what the Ghana payment systems was like 10 years ago. I remember when you sign checks within region, it takes about 3 days for the checks to be signed, and inter-regional checks, we're talking about 7, 8, 9 days, etc. Today, we can boast of same day and next day nationwide when it comes to check clearing. I wouldn't also want to forget our first baby, eSwitch. That was the vehicle that was created to mitigate against certain issues that we have in Ghana.
The company also outlined some programs planned for the anniversary celebrations under the theme 10 years of promoting electronic payments in Ghana.
This is Business Live. We're taking a quick break here. We'll be right back.
Business Live today.
Thanks for staying. Welcome back. It's now time for the interview of the day.
Interview of the day.
And genuinely report things that can be investigated. I think then it will put some fear even in some people who think that they can just do it and get away with it. But this corruption thing is something that we must tackle. I personally have spoken publicly that corrupt people go through the law courts and were corrupt must be executed. I mean, it is really selfishness that you are in a position and with the enormity of problems facing us and the seriousness that this government is attaching to get us forward, to take money from the mouth of the nation, monies that can be used in education, that can be used to support some businesses. I think then you are an enemy of the nation, and we must eliminate you.
Now, one of the things that the government has been talking about that it wants to do to enhance business or support businesses is the creation of or making sure that all Ghanaians have national IDs and also the digital addressing system. How would this be relevant to businesses? And by the way, Philip Soa is with AfriWave Telecoms. So how would this be relevant to businesses?
I mean, the national ID system and national addressing system are incredibly important. Basically, to do business with anyone, you want to know that the person you're doing business with is who they say they are. And then you also need to know that they live where they say they live. And those are two key things that are important before you can either extend credit or extend any kind of facility to somebody.
So it's
Interview of the day.
And that will be it for Business Live for tonight. Many thanks for watching. My name is Emmanuel Boachi. You have to join me again tomorrow for another edition. Good evening.